Hey friends, this is Marie from Living Felt, and you have tuned in to the full version of our Woolly Wednesday episode. We are going to pick up on our nano felting lessons. We are going to full or further shrink this piece, and we're actually going to do another nano felt where we use some fun textural elements using the silks. So I hope you'll stay tuned. Be sure to hit the subscribe button so you can get notified every time we go live, and think about joining our group Living Felt Friends on Facebook. Let's jump into it.
Hi y'all, I'm Hannah.
Hi, I'm Ann.
Hi, I'm Holly.
Hi, I'm Marie, and we are coming to you live from the beautiful state of Texas because it's Happy Woolly Wednesday! Hey everyone, Happy Wednesday. These girls are pretty cheery for being soggy today. We have, I don't know if you see on the news, we're having torrential downpours and it's let up right now, but everyone's hanging in there. One gal went home to bucket some water, hopefully not. We hope not. But we are so glad you're here with us today because we're going to nano felt. But what have y'all been up to? Y'all been busy?
I've been pulling a lot of fiber for studio packs right now.
Been talking to a lot of our felting friends online and on the phone, so that's been fun. Thank you for being awesome.
Continuing to stock up on inventory because you guys have obviously been busy.
You guys make our work so much fun, and we just love seeing what you make. So thank you so much for participating, and today we're going to get back to our nano felting. So thanks for being here, y'all. Let's get started. Thank you everyone for joining in. Happy Woolly Wednesday. We are Living Felt Felting Supplies based in Central Texas, and you will see that we have friends all over the world, and hopefully you see them chiming in, saying hello and where they're from. So please do the same. Say hi and where you're from. We're going to check in with a few people. We are nano felting today. We started off this little series. It's a mini series with a sort of a chit chat and a look at a bunch of different types of examples. Nano felting is where you are wet felting, but you bind the fiber to fabric. And then last week we got together and we actually nano felted a little sample. And a lot of you have posted in our group, which is Living Felt Friends, samples of your very first trials of nano felting, and that's awesome. So let me say hi to a few people. I see here's Kim from the Netherlands. Hi Kim. And there's Melissa in Minneapolis. Wendy is with us. She's in the UK, I think. Connie's in Illinois. Ruth is in Illinois. Carol is in Ontario, Canada. And I see Lauren. Hi from Topsham. Are you in the UK? That's so awesome. And I know it's really late there where you all are across the pond. So thank you for joining in and ending your day with us. This is what we made last week. It's just a sample. It's not really a thing. We wet felted a small piece. We put a silk chiffon fabric as our base layer. We added this chocolate brown merino top. And then we added three different types of silk. So a thrift store find, another thrift store find with beadwork and lace, and then our Margalon rarefied silk that I hand dyed. So I'll just hold that up. Now this piece was only wet felted for about 20 minutes. It's absolutely a solid piece of fabric. We could stop right here, but we took a vote in our group and everyone decided they want to see it fulled more. So that's the first thing we're going to do today. Is fulling is after you have your felt established as a fabric, you further shrink it. Sometimes you full, like in a garment, you might full because you want it to be more fitted in the waist, or because you want to shrink the sleeves more, or you want to shrink any part for a better fit. You might full to just further create a more dense fabric, whether that's for a phone case or a vessel or a pair of slippers or a couch pillow, it doesn't matter. But fulling is kind of the same process, which is increased agitation and usually increased heat and soap to further get those fibers to lock tighter and tighter together. That's the first thing we're going to do. And then I have another sample sort of started so that we can just play a little bit with some textures you might create in your nano felting, whether you're making a scarf or a wall hanging or a table runner or a purse, whatever. Cool? Okay. All right, well, thanks for being here, everyone. So why don't, let's hear from you all. If it's your first time, please say I'm new, or first time, is the first time joining us. We always have new friends joining in. And if you have never nanofelted, let us know that too. You might decide to watch back last week's episode and just give it a try. We're gonna turn down the cameras here and look at this piece up close before we start felting it or fulling it more, so you can see what that migration looks like and see what the piece looks like before we really shrink it down. So stay tuned just a second while we reset our cameras. Okay, thank y'all for being here. All right, let's look at the back first, just for fun. So the back was this turquoisey green, sort of a jewel tone green piece of silk gauze or silk chiffon, which is just a little bit heavier than a gauze. And all the brown that you see on there is the fiber migrating through the fabric to that side. People asked us, how do you know when the fiber is migrating through the fabric? And that's how you know. You can physically see it. If you're brand new to felting or nanofelting, be willing to let your piece sit overnight so that you can handle it the next day and give it a closer look. Once you've rinsed it or let it dry, usually the condition of the fabric, this new fabric that you've created, even though you have bound fibers and fabric together, you can tell how durable it is. Now this is felted, but it's not felted as much as it could be. But nonetheless, it would hold up well for a wall hanging or a table runner or even a little tunic, and still having like a nice drape to it. You know, it still has, you can make the fiber lighter if you wanted to have even more drape, but it has a real nice hand to it. And today we're going to shrink this down some more. So you can look up close at how the fibers have migrated through and how, you know, all the silks are still really flat. They have a little tiny bit of puckering to them, but not a huge amount of distortion. And there's nothing underneath them either. How are we doing, Ann?
Good, I'm gonna zoom out just a little.
Okay, am I too close? All right, good. All right, so I just wanted you to see that. Now, to full, all we're gonna do is add some more soap, and we're gonna add some really hot water. Now, a couple of people asked me last week whether you can nuke something in the microwave to make it hotter, and I tend to not do that myself. I am more of I just don't use the microwave very often, and so what I like to use is, in my studio I have an electric kettle always at the ready, and so I heat my water up here, but you don't want to burn your hands. So let me get set up here. This is what I'm going to use is my rubber mat. If you're worried about your table underneath, you can put a towel underneath. You can always have a towel underneath your work surface. I'm going to have a towel off to the side. I have started my water bucket here with just some regular tap water, and I have my soap in there so it can just start you know, getting the water soapy. And it's not hot, but I'm going to add hot water right to that. And I want it to be hot, but I want to be able to put my hands in it without squealing so loud that you'll hear me. That's kind of my goal. So you can put a towel under your surface, or you could also put plastic underneath your surface. I'm gonna put my soap right down there. And we might zoom out a little now too. So Anne's gonna zoom us out now that we've looked at our fabric. And I'm just gonna put this down so I don't have water running off my table.
All right, Ann, to our live friends, and we're fixing that camera issue right now. Thank you very much for
What was it?
patience. I think the view flipped on us.
It went backwards?
There we go. Yes, it did.
Gosh, I didn't see that on mine. Oh, there it goes. I see it now. Okay, cool. Okay, so here's our little piece, and you know, when we started felting this, we started, you know, we used mesh and we used our plastic, but we don't need that now. We can handle this just fine. So in order to full it or further shrink it, we're gonna do more agitation. But the first thing we wanna do is get it hot and soapy.
And a couple of our felting friends want to know if you are noticing any bare spots at this stage, or if you wanted to add more embellishment fibers, could you add more to
I would have added them long before this. Personally, I would have added them long before this because this is beyond what we would call the soft felt stage. It is felted, it is a fabric, and if I wanted to add embellishment fibers and make sure they stick, especially since I used a fine merino top, a 19 micron, I would have added them long before now. So you want to look for bare spots before you ever get the fiber wet, and then if you notice bare spots as you're pressing after you've wet, you want to add the fiber then. Especially the faster felting your fiber, say that 10 times fast, you want to add those additions earlier on. Okay, so I'm going to actually add soap to both sides. The soap helps actually change the pH of the fibers and helps open them up, just like the water does as well, and just like the heat does as well. So the first thing I'm going to do is get this hot and soapy, and what we're going to look at is a few different means of fulling. So one means of fulling is just to continue rolling like you were doing. You can roll the fiber all by itself, the fabric. You can roll it between your hands like this. You can do what's called palming, which is to rub it between your hands like this and work across the whole piece. If the fibers are roughing up under your touch, then use a barrier, whether it's still your bubble wrap or your plastic or whatever. So right now we're just going to look at a few different ways you might shrink this down.
And a couple of our felting friends want to know if it's possible to over soap your project, and how do you know that you're getting enough soap in
Oh, that's a great question. So I use a non-sudsing soap, so I'm not worried about adding too much soap. It's this vegetable-based olive oil soap has a high vegetable content, and so its goal is really just to add a lubrication as well as help change that pH. If you have a very sudsy soap, or if you're someone that likes to use dish soap, then cut it with water so that it doesn't suds so much, because the air bubbles, you can have too much soap if the air bubbles will cause the fibers to float apart, and you don't want that. The same reason you don't want too much water. So I've added water to heat it up, but I'm going to squeeze some of that water out because this doesn't need to be dripping wet. We want it to be warm and soapy, but not dripping wet. So you can full just like this, rolling in your hands. Just a moment ago when we were looking at the tunic, I was mentioning spot fulling. Spot fulling is where you want maybe just one part of it to shrink and not another. So let's say that you have an area like that, like a corner is kind of sticking out. This is shrinking pretty uniform, but let's say you want to get that corner in, then just go after that corner. I do this thing, I just call it a pinch and roll, and then I'll do a press and roll just like that. This is one way, pinch and roll, and I'm pinching very tight and rolling it very tight. And you can also turn it backwards, you can probably see a little bit better. You can also like rub in a circle. If the fibers are pilling under your touch, you need to just go back to your regular rolling and methods of felting first so that you get the fibers more entwined before you get too rough with it. Because fulling is usually a much more aggressive stage. Now so far all I'm doing is rolling and pinching and rubbing. If you don't mind your piece getting a little squirrely, and once you definitely have it fulled enough that you can, or felted enough that you can rub it with your hands without it pilling, you can do things like wadding. I call this wadding. I don't know what other people call it.
And Rochelle asks, it seems that you are working it gently, is that correct?
I'm using a pretty good, hand as far as my strength. In this case, because I'm really trying to full it down for you all and shrink it for you all, I'm not being super gentle. I mean, if you were to see my nail beds, when I'm rolling, I'm really pinching. Another thing you can do besides the wadding is you can throw, and some teachers don't throw and some teachers won't let you throw in their class. It really depends on what you want to have happen. When you tend to add this pounding motion, the fibers tend to jig, jig, like into each other, and you get a little more texture, I think. You can get texture without throwing. You just got to keep shrinking. People who felt in the dryer, they're going to have the same type of effects because the piece is thudding, thudding, thudding in the dryer. And so even right away, I think you can see, I'm just going to pause for a second, that we're starting to get a little more character in the piece. It's starting to shrink a little bit, like this. This is starting to pucker or ruche, some people say more, because the fibers are getting closer together. So fulling is nothing more than this, continuing to agitate the fibers, usually with them warm and with them soapy, to get them to get closer and closer together. I'm going to keep going this way. So I'm going to pause and see if there's some more questions.
See, Devin has a great question. When doing something like a garment, can you fold just certain areas for fit, or do you have to fold the entire piece?
When you're felting a garment, thank you for this. So Devin asked, when you're felting a garment, can you fold just certain areas for fit, or do you have to felt the entire piece? And that is the same thing we were just talking about in spot fulling. So first you absolutely need to get a good felt going. And then you need to full the entire thing because you need all the fibers to be close enough together that you have a real solid fabric that's not just going to pill every time you wear it. And then you generally try the garment on and note the areas where you need more shrinkage or a better fit, and then yes, you spot full. But you bring the whole garment to a particular stage before you start spot fulling, if that makes sense.
Okay. And one of our building friends asked, how do you keep your fabrics from being swallowed up by the fibers?
It could happen that your fabrics get swallowed up by the fibers. It really does depend on the weave of the fabric that you have. And so what you need to do is make test samples, and which is exactly what we're doing, is making a test sample to see how do you like how these two things or three things or whatever they are play together. Absolutely. So in this case, the Margolon silk, the brown Margolon silk that was like a caramel color almost with the dark chocolate, really is getting overtaken by the fiber, maybe because the colors are too close together. I've used them together in my big skirt, and what you see is that once the Margolon dries, it's going to be more visible. But I think that question is a great question, and it's a real good argument for making test samples. So you see what happens and do you like it. Now, can you guys see that this is already smaller than it was when we started? It was about 9.5, I think, by 12 when it was dry. And I know someone asked me how much was it, not dry, but felted and dry. And I know someone asked me how big it was when we started, and I haven't figured that out yet. Because I cut it off a piece of fabric and I didn't measure. I think I cut all the way across and I didn't save the cutout. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm just going to do this a little bit more, and then we're going to jump to what we'll do is we'll rinse this, roll it in a towel, and then we will look at it at the end of the show. I'm just going to do a little more wadding. Now, as I said, you may not want to wad something. You may not want to put something through this kind of treatment. You may not want to throw it. Make your samples, see how you like the outcomes, see how you like the effect.
And Claire asks, does the silk fabric itself ever alter the shrinkage rate?
Yeah, the silk fabric is going to definitely play a part. And there's so many different types of silk, so many different weights. These things have, having the beadwork is going to play a factor, or having this lace inlay is going to play a factor. So you definitely want to test it out. But I will say, even in making my great big skirt where I had tons of fabrics and design elements in it, I was still able to get a 50% shrinkage across. So one of the things you'll start to learn how to do is how to lay out your fiber to get the shrinkage where you want it in a particular spot. that makes sense.
And Sherry asked, to keep it from pilling, you full it more. Is that what I'm understanding?
Yeah, if a fiber is too loose, it's going to pill more. It's going to pill more, but also the more short fibers you have, the more it's going to pill. In my experience, a felted garment is going to pill to some degree, just like a knitted wool garment will, or a knitted cashmere will pill. Or sometimes acrylic too will pill also. Now you can see we're starting to get some different shrinkage rates. Like this one is tending to go down fine. This one's a little longer. It's being a little more resistant. It's buckling here in the middle where we did I think the fiber only went side to side, and I can't remember now which direction it went. I should have taken notes. But you can see that this side is shrinking down more than this side. So you can play with it if you want to get uniform shrinkage across, but I think you can see just already from our example that we've been able to shrink this down from where it was when we started 5 minutes ago. Yes, ask me a question.
Linda asked an interesting question. She asked, what would you change from this piece if you did one again?
If I did one again, well, I guess since I'm not using it for anything, that's hard to say. Since I'm not using it for anything, it's hard to say, but I did do the fiber layout in 3 different directions, and that was just to sort of share with you all. That should be intentional in whatever you're felting. You should know why you're laying the fiber in those directions. But for me, in this particular piece, I wouldn't really change anything. I just like to bring fabrics and fiber together and see, how do I like them? How do I like how they play together? And I like this fabric as the base. So here's what we're gonna do. We're just gonna put this aside now. It's a real nice solid fabric. If you wanted to make a purse like this or something, a wallet, an eyeglass case, with this level of felting, this would be really nice and durable. And you could continue to shrink it more, but you only need to shrink it as much as you need to for whatever its purpose is. Okay, any final questions on this piece?
A couple of our felting friends want to see the back of the piece up close.
Okay, sure. Let me just see. I can't really rinse it out in this water because it's so soapy. But I think you'll be able to see from when we started how different it looks.
Oh, yeah.
It's darker because it's wet, but you can see a lot more migration of the brown. You can see how small it is by comparison. A gauze or a chiffon, like what's on the back, tends to pucker very little. If you want more pucker, usually go for a habitai, or you can see some interesting kind of textures on this stuff, how it tends to squiggle out. And so we will dry this piece out. We'll just give it a quick rinse and we'll dry it out, so that you can see it a little bit before we go. And of course, I'll post a picture later. Okay, I'm gonna pass that off to Anne. Okay, so for today, we are going to jump to a new part of the lesson. And I'm gonna set this aside. Anne's gonna go rinse our piece. And what we're gonna look at today is a little bit of texture in your nano felt. Let me get my soap off here. I'm going to leave this down just so I don't, my grippy doesn't rub all over the place. Let me show you what we're working with. Today we're going to be working with just some fine merino top. This is purple. And I'm going to be working with a variety of silk fabrics. I already have a little piece going. So this is a silk chiffon. This is like a pongee. It's like 3 momme, finer than a habitai, not as heavy as a habitai. This is one of my thrift store finds, and you've seen this in a few of my felted samples. I have some felted bits. This is just a loosely felted little snake. This is from my art bra. Have any of you seen that? I nano felted an art bra, I don't know, 4 years ago or so now. It's on my personal blog. And this is just a lightly felted piece, so I might cut part of this up and use it as an inclusion. I'm going to use some felted beads. We have a video on how to make felt beads fast. So if you want to make a whole bunch of felt beads and just kind of have them in your stash and available to use, you might watch that. I'm not going to use these today, but I brought some wooden beads, and you can use wooden beads in your felting also. Just I thought that might come up as a question, so I thought I would suggest those can be used. And then I brought just a little piece of what's like our resist material. It's like a little piece of foam, and I'm going to show you how you can use some inclusions and additions to add some interesting textures even with your nano felt. Thank you, Anne.
Absolutely.
Okay, Anne's rinsed our piece. And the other thing I brought was, if you're looking for dyed silks, we're going to bring in lots more silks this summer. Some of y'all know we're moving, so we're going to wait to get our move in. But we have these lovely silk chiffon scarves, which are 21 inches by 72. Isn't that right, Anne? 21 by 72, lots of delicious colors. We're going to bring in even more. And these are great to use in your nano felt, even if you cut them up and use them in little bits like I do here. They're a really fun way to add some fabric to your stash.
Rose asks, can you use silk ties?
I know people who have used silk ties. They're pretty thick, so make a sample, because everyone's going to be a little bit different, but some ties are very thick. Okay. So here's the piece I started, just so that we could kind of jump right into today's lesson. If you missed last week's lesson, it may help you to watch back to that. What I've done today that's different is, rather than a silk gauze or chiffon on the back, as I'm using the pongee, which is a little bit thicker, I have done a very thin layer. I haven't weighed it, just a cross hatch of this fine 19 micron, 19 and a half micron purple merino top. So you don't have to have a base layer of fabric. I just wanted to do it so you can see how that fabric behaves differently than the chiffon that we used last time. Okay? Scissors somewhere. The other things we're going to use is our pool noodle, which we used last time. We'll use a little bit of plastic to cover our piece and felt it some. You can use mesh as well. I'll demonstrate that. We're going to use some scissors to cut some stuff up, our olive oil soap, of course, our water, and I guess that's probably all. Okay, and y'all just feel free to ask questions. I'm just going to just demonstrate a couple of things you might play with and experiment with, no matter what you're felting. Remember, these are just samples we're working with here.
Benita asks, is there any fiber you can't use when nano felting, or are there any things to stay away from?
When you're nano felting, it's a good idea to use fibers that are fine enough to migrate through the fabric. So I'm going to sound like, you know, broken record, but make a sample, make a sample, make a sample. Some people have been sharing samples that don't have a lot of migration happening between their fabric and their fibers. The fabric is just barely hanging in there. So notice that, because you should have the migration, which is why I wanted to show you our samples in the very beginning, and you could kind of see what that looks like. You want the fibers to migrate through the fabric. So I've seen people do that with coarser fibers and finer fibers. You just want to play with that yourself. What I'm doing is I'm putting these down as inclusions. That means I'm going to put them actually underneath the fabric. And we did a felting lesson a couple of years ago where we did that. You can do it under fiber and under fabric. I'm going to put these under fabric. And this little piece is something you could leave in or take out. I've done both. So it's just to resist, and the fiber is going to bind to this as well. The fabric. If you're concerned about it binding at all, you can always take little tiny bits of your fiber, and you can even cut it and then just kind of place it over the top. My piece is so lightly felted that it probably won't be a problem, but I want to show you that even if you have concern, what you can do is make your own little glue, if you will, by putting tiny bits of fiber over the top. Now this, we don't want it to stick to. It's going to bind around it, so don't worry about that. Ask me anything.
Heather asks, can the short fiber merino bats be used instead of the merino top?
Yes, you can use the short fiber merino bats, but just think about what it's for, and we touched on that a little bit last time, because the short fiber merino bats tend to pill a bit more in a wearable because there's so many short bits. So just give that a consideration. depending on what you want to use that item for. Now, all I've done is just plunk this right on top of those little bits underneath. And I'm going to go back and kind of cover up these edges just because I like to control the design. In fact, I like this rose here. So what I'm going to do is actually just buckle it over a little bit. Okay. I'm going to cover them a little bit just because I like to not see the stringy bits of the silk. I like to not see them. I like it to look a little bit cleaner. Whether it's for a purse, a pillowcase, like I said, or a wall hanging, I think it looks a little more finished if you can't see the cut edges. Now, sometimes they melt right in, but when there's a lot of contrast between the fabric and the fiber, it might just be really obvious, and you might like it to be a little cleaner. Can I ask me anything? That's all I'm doing is covering that up. I might leave that one open just so you can see. Okay, that is just having some inclusions underneath. Something else I want to do with you, and I think I'll do it with this one, is make like the little bauble bits. And we did bauble bits. Is that their official name? We did bauble bits, I think, when we did the seascape. And I'm going to show you a couple of ways to do that with this little bauble bits. You could take something like a felt bead like this. It can be fully felted, or you can add a little bit of fiber over the top. You can even do a crosshatch if you're worried about it binding at all. So you can take a little bead, if you have one that's already felted, and add fiber right over the top. What I'm going to do is tie this into the silk like this. You can tie them into your silk, but what will really help is if you have a little bit of a tail sticking out of the bottom. That's going to help it bind to the fiber underneath. So keep a little bit of a tail sticking out. That's going to help them from just being, I've seen the baubles just be kind of saggy where the fiber inside doesn't really bind. So now that you have this, pinch it really close, and then take a tiny bit of your fiber. It can either match your silk or match the base. Just take a tiny bit and wrap it really tightly around the base of your ball. Really, really, really tightly.
Ooh, our felting friends are getting inspired by baubles.
Yeah, baubles are really fun. Now you want enough silk left in the perimeter to bind down to what's beneath. When you make these baubles, it's really helpful to get them very close to each other. So you can also make them with your hand, and you can felt them a tiny bit. The more they're felted to start with, the more they're going to hold their shape. So you can make them different sizes and felt them yourself. How are we doing on time? We're just going to have enough time to, yeah, okay. I'm just going to hurry and do a few of these so that you can kind of get an idea. So what you can do is felt them a little bit by hand. I'm going to wet this, and I'm going to soap it, and I'm going to wet it, I'm going to soap it, and I'm just going to felt it a little bit in my hand. The harder it is, the more it's going to hold the shape. And you do kind of want it to hold its shape. Let's see if I can roll it on my bubble. It's kind of like working with clay. So the looser it is, the more it's going to want to distort when you felt. But I still like to do the same thing, and that is just put that little pinch so that it can stick down. I'm going to put this one into my silk, and you'll be able to see that this one is much smaller and not as hard. I'm going to put that one in there, and then you want them to be pretty close together. Sorry if I keep going off camera. And I'm going to put some more felted ones in there.
Angelina shares, I love this effect, Marie. Helen shares, this is so interesting. I'm learning so much.
Oh, you guys are so sweet. Thanks for always having the patience with our little mini bits. We're just going to try and get better and better at doing little mini bits. Oh, see, I forgot to put my staple. Think of it as a staple or an anchor, and I forgot to put my staple. So I promise you that you'll like the outcome better if you put that little staple over the top and have it trailing down. It's gonna lay it down, give you the opportunity to lay it down much tighter. And when you make these, you might think of it kind of like flower arrangements, and that is odd numbers work better than even numbers. It just does for some reason. I don't understand it, why our eye likes that uneven and other things so even. So just a tiny little staple right there, make it tight, get your baubles all nice and tight together, and then just pull that off. Now I could keep going, but why don't we stop at 3? Is 3 random? 2 random? Should I do 5? I only brought 4. So I'll make another little tiny, no, we gotta hurry, sorry. Okay, so I'm gonna stop that one right there. And actually, just for fun, now that I think about it, what we'll do is we're gonna get 2 effects out of this same fabric. I'm trimming off these bits. I'm gonna put this here, and then I'm gonna use this here, and I'm gonna scrunch it up. Now, you're gonna have a little bit easier time controlling scrunching something up if you kind of have a little bit of wetness going. You can wet your base fabric first. You can scrunch stuff up on the base layer, which I always do often, or you can kind of start to get this wet now and control that scrunching up a little bit. Did I bring a ball press? I sort of thought I did. Here's one.
When Rose asks for the baubles, do you have to tie them off after each one? Can you just place the balls on the wool and then cover them with
You should tie them off every time. You got to tie them off, or what happens is they won't stay together like that. You got to tie them off. Okay, so I'm wetting this fiber underneath. Sometimes when you're putting designs on top, it helps to have kind of a flatter surface. And in this case, I'm gonna put this silk down so it's right here, and then I'm gonna crinkle it. Having it wet helps you kind of control that crinkle a little bit so that we get some fun texture happening in there. And there, now we'll just build off of this one piece and get a multiple, if you will, treatments out of the same fabric. Oh, and then under this one, why don't we just do this underneath this little pinky bit, and we'll put the pinky bit on the end. So just some snakes. And this is really just to get your mind thinking. Here's our philosophy here at Living Felt. 1, you're brilliant. 2, you're amazing. 3, you can do anything. And 4, this is supposed to be fun. We try not to take it too seriously, and we want to sort of give your creative mind ideas of things to play with. That's what we want. And that's why we like to do Woolly Wednesdays, is just give you something, encourage you to maybe try something new that you haven't tried before. Because why not? Isn't that what art's for? Having fun and exploring. Okay, so what I'm going to do is put this over those bits. And I'm going to get a little bit of crinklage in there too. And then we're just going to start felting. So I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to get a little bit of crinklage in between. And ask me any questions or Marie will never stop talking. What I want to do is I don't really want it to tent up over these pieces, and I don't mind if it crinkles around them. I just don't want it to tent across the top. So I want it to bind with the fiber in between the layers of the little snakes that I put in there. Okay. Yes. Let me get everything out of the way. Okay. All right, any questions? I'm gonna seal this off here. I'm gonna hide this layer, this little division with fiber.
Let's see. Alrighty, so Megan asks a question. She says, is this tutorial aimed at novices or more advanced? I'm puzzled as I notice you have a few top fans who I presume are experienced explaining they have done these baubles before.
Oh, well, we just kind of go with the flow. You know, sometimes we find that someone can be more experienced, but they haven't tried this. And people who've done baubles, yay, great, because that means that as other people want to try it, they'll be there encouraging them. So we don't really try and limit it so much. We always kind of do. Our tutorials are kind of general unless we do a more involved felt along, you know, and then we kind of suggest. So making samples is something everybody should do, whether they're experienced or not. Whenever you're trying a new technique or you want to see how your fibers and fabrics work together. So I guess in truth, it's kind of for the beginner, but we don't mind how much experience someone has. If you want to watch, thanks for being here. Okay, so now what I'm going to do, I'm going to go ahead and use my mesh so that I can properly wet and soak this entire piece. And some of you know I like mesh, and some people just jump straight into the plastic. This mesh we carry in our store. I've been using it for pretty much as long as I've been felting. And so I'm going to just wet the entire thing. And I'm going to go ahead and add soap with my hands, which is pretty much my normal way, although the water is pretty soapy too. So remember, we're just making a sample today. And the first thing you always want to do when you're wet felting is just get all of the water and soap into the piece and through the piece. Water and soap in, air out.
And Lisa asked, what were the snakes made of?
Oh, I'm sorry. Those were just little felted bits. And they're kind of softly felted, oh, by the way. But those are just little felted bits from something else I had made. Just felted, just wool. Same, they're going to be from the same, they could have actually even been merino short fiber. I can't remember. So now what I like to do just around the little baubles is I'm going to start felting kind of around them first. But honestly, you could roll this whole thing up. I like to first press, 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 and make sure everything is wet and soapy. And then gentle, gentle, gentle massaging. Gentle, gliding even, not massaging with your hands. If you're concerned, or if you're concerned about it sticking, peel your mesh back. Go at a real shallow angle because it's going to want to stick either where it's dry or where you have stickier fibers like a hanky or something. But I like to peel back often when I use the mesh, which is really just in the beginning. You can jump straight to the plastic and bubble wrap. And why don't we do that for people who are just more comfortable with that? Now this is a sample, so I don't really worry about the ends too much, but you can just scoop them in just like that and scoop them into the edge of the fabric. Now some people don't roll until they have, you know, a felt forming. And you can roll before that. If you prefer to work with your plastic like this, and we touched on this last time for those who, some people I know are just kind of freaked out by the plastic because it feels strange. What you want to do is wet the plastic. When I'm rubbing, I don't want stuff to roam around. I don't want it to shift. So the baubles and stuff, I want to kind of hold those in place so that the fibers that are underneath have a chance to bind. Remember, in making samples, you're also sometimes testing, you know, fabrics that you've not worked with before because you don't know, like maybe you know how to do this technique, but you don't know if that fabric is really good for that technique. You might also not know if it's going to run, like something in here is running. It's probably, that might have actually been my thrift store pink and not my other pink that I know better. Because these are all from my bits bags. So if you're going to felt through the plastic, this is how you do it, and you still want to make sure that it's not shifting under your pressure.
And Patsy asked, how thick is the plastic?
Oh, it's like 0.7 mil or something like that. It's like the lightest painter's plastic. Just get it at the hardware store. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to roll up from this end where I have a little bit extra of bubble wrap. And I don't roll too tight at first, like you don't want the fabric to buckle underneath. You just want it to hold. I'm gonna actually stretch out my towel. And so that I can just roll part of it. Well, no, actually I'll roll the whole thing. Okay. So while we're rolling, and we're gonna do our best to just roll, we're gonna roll as much as we can, and we just have like 10 or 15 minutes left. This is going to be just the same as we did last week. In fact, I'm not even going to tie it off. I'm just going to roll. So now, a number of you felted last week. You made your own nano felt samples. Tell us or ask us questions based on what you did while I roll this piece.
Let's see, Deb asks, should the sample be a certain size?
It really depends. You do want a sample that's big enough to tell you a story, and it's the story of the fabric or the fiber. So you don't want to make a 6-inch sample for what's going to be a full-length tunic, or table runner. You want to get enough of the fabric, enough of the test fabric and the fabric that you're making with your hands to tell you the story of the piece that you want to use it in. I hope that makes sense. It might be, how does that fabric distort? Like maybe it has a cool pattern and you don't want to see the pattern anymore. So you want to distort that fabric enough. Anne, is the pixie hat here?
The pixie, I think so.
Okay, I'm going to have Anne grab a sample for us real quick, just so I can answer that question in one more dimension and show you something where maybe even one of these fabrics was in it, but it was shrunk enough. It was shrunk enough that you couldn't see the pattern anymore, but you got a new pattern as a result of how the fabric shrunk down. And sometimes that's the goal, is just to take advantage of the color and pattern play, but not maintain that same print, if you will. And I'll show you that in this sample that Anne's going to get for us. So I'm not really counting, but notice that as I roll, I keep shifting. I like to do short little burst rolls on a small project. I don't roll here, roll there, and that's just a personal preference. If I'm doing a big project, I'll do bigger, longer rolls. Yeah, thank you, Anne. Now, if y'all watch back from last week, you're gonna see this is the pixie hat Anne just got for me. So if you watch back to last week, we brought in some of these same fibers, these same fabrics. These fabrics were on my big skirt that I shared. And you can see that that pattern isn't even recognizable anymore, but it creates a really fun texture and play with color because it was shrunk so much to achieve that effect. So the sample should be big enough that you could shrink it to tell the story of that fabric, because this fabric changes so much, in how it looks throughout. Does that kind of answer the question?
It does.
Okay.
And a few of our felting friends want to know, as you're rolling, are you pressing down less
yeah.
force than normal because of the bobbles?
Oh, no, I'm not pressing down less because of the bobbles. I'm pressing anyway, regardless of the bobbles. Now, if they're not fully felted, then they're gonna smush out into like little buttons. So, I didn't felt that one at all, so I expect it not to hold a round shape, and that was part of what I wanted to show you. We sort of made that little thing in 30 seconds. So if you want them to hold up, then go ahead and see it's just kind of becoming a button. You want to go ahead and felt it a little more, or spend a little more time making it into a bobble. So let's just go from the other direction while we still have some time. And for those of you who are watching for the first time, please know that last week we felted our sample in 20 or 30 minutes, Anne, of time, because the layout went pretty fast. So really we're going to keep repeating this. When you felt, you generally want to treat a piece equally. That means you're going to roll from each side for an equal amount of time or an equal number of rolls. When I say side, I also mean edges. This edge, this edge, this edge, this edge, this, and then flip it over and do the same. That's how you control shrinkage, as well as how you lay out the fiber. So how you lay out the fiber, what elements you've included. The more big, bulky elements, the less shrinkage you're going to get right there. What questions do we have, Anne?
One of our felting friends asked if all nano felting is done with that silk wool silk.
No, absolutely not. Some nano felting is like my hat that I just threw on the ground. Hold on. This is, and we did talk about this, I think the first week when we did like a little chit chat. But we tend to refer to things that are just silk inclusions also as a nano felt. So this is wool on the inside and just some silk fabric inlays on the outside, and someone would still call that a nano felt hat. You could also have a nano felt hat that has a silk fabric as the inside layer and 100% wool on the outside. That would also be a nano felt. So it seems to be that even though nano felt started out as being at least one solid layer of silk. Now we refer to a lot of these processes that include the fabric as nano felt.
And Carla asks, so the soap on top of the plastic is just to help your hands slide
Yeah,
across as opposed to
exactly. It's just a slippy, slidey surface. That's all it is.
That hat got a lot of love.
Oh, the pixie hat? Yeah, it's a fun project. I made the pixie hat, and I'd felted a hat before, but I made the pixie hat as a result of a project in Felt magazine, which is the Australian felt magazine. And I made my own resist, but I kind of followed that lady's recipe of like the basic size, if you will. You can. Let's unroll this and see what we got. We have a few more minutes, so I am going to roll from side to side. And for those of you who are bored watching, we'll then watch the playback and fast forward through this bit. And we're just going to keep rolling. Rolling is agitating. Agitating is getting the fibers to further bind together. Some people might use a sander in the beginning stages like this. I'm not a big sander person. I just like the quietude of felting, except when I'm talking your ear off. What questions do we have, Anne? And for those of you who are joining for the first time, we're just doing this little thing called making fabric with your bare hands.
A couple of our folks want to know if we'll ever have a hat making tutorial.
We will, and while I'm not going to let a lot of details out about that, I will tell you that the person who's going to do it is a world-renowned felt maker of hats, and that will be an online workshop, so it won't be like a freebie that we post, but it will be an online workshop, and we are working on a number of online workshops for you that you can watch on your phone, on your tablet, on your computer. That will be one, but bear with us here as we ramp up to that, because it's not in the super short order. So in the meantime, felt and build your chops. Felt and build your chops, and felt and build your chops. We have lots of fun things planned for you, but we can't do it all as fast as we can think of it. I can think of it a lot faster than I can execute it all. But isn't that the magic of life?
Wendy asks, felting fairies, does Marie normally talk this much? And yes, but it's all great. It's all wisdom, and we love it.
I'm kind of an external processor, so if they come into my office on a particularly verbal day, they don't get out fast. But I go in little spurts because I have hours of quiet time in a day, just to myself, just quiet. Okay, I'm gonna flip this around one more time, and then we'll see. We're only still on the top side. We're gonna flip this around one more time and then see how we did just in a first pass. So we went side to side, and now we went, say, top to bottom, and we're gonna go this direction before we even give it a look.
So Lisa asks, if you want to control certain shrinkage, can you not roll in some of the directions?
You could, but it would be better to do that in your layout of fiber. You know, it's better to do that in your layout of fiber. So you do want to roll, you know, wherever you want the most shrinkage, start rolling in those two directions. Okay, so let's say you're making something and you want to shrink it more this way. We'll start by rolling these sides. You could even flip it over and roll those sides, and you're going to get the initial shrinkage going closer this way, and then you can shrink the length. So you can lay out your fibers in that way also if you want more shrinkage that way. And that would be the first place to start, is the direction you lay your fibers. And then the second thing would be where you initially do your agitation. But you still, you know, felt is a non-woven fabric, but you still want those fibers to intertwine as much as possible. I hope that helps. Okay, what else we got? We got time for just a couple more questions while I roll my fastest.
Already, a lot of folks are just excited about the upcoming workshop. People want to know where to find the links to them.
You guys got to put your seatbelts on. I'm telling you, we're not ready for that. That's why I'm hesitant always to tell anything that we're working on. So they're not They're not out yet, so bear with us. We're gonna have to get further into this year. For those of you who don't know, we're just about to come upon a very big move. We're gonna move our entire shop and warehouse to a new location, and that is just about 4 weeks out. So at the moment, I have promised my husband that I would not do anything new. No new projects until we're moved and settled in. So the next big thing we have is Kiyoshi Mino is coming in July for an in-person workshop to do realistic cats. And those could be domestic or a wild cat. Kiyoshi's just a master felt maker, and he needle felts and sculpts the wool. So that's our next really big thing. And everything else is gonna have to come later in the year. Okay, let's unfurl this thing here a few more times. I'm hot. It's warm in here. Okay, let's unroll this and see how we did. Now this is just phase one. Phase one is just rolling side one. Phase two is rolling side two. And then generally you evaluate kind of where you are. So right now it looks rather flat because that's how we're felting it. We're felting it pressing and mashing and flat. So what we will do, and you can start to see that the back, see how the back is starting to pucker a little even though it's wet? Can you see a little bit of puckering? The thicker silks tend to buckle a little bit more, and when you want them to buckle, you put the fiber on the opposite side. So you can see here this is my foamy inclusion underneath there. You can rub from the back as well, like it's a little bit safer to rub from the back here, and you'll start to pull the fibers up through a silk area if you rub from that side. But I would keep rolling, and I promise I will keep felting this piece. Yeah, see there's that foam inclusion. The felt inclusions are so small they're going to kind of melt in, but we'll see how this will shrink. So I've rolled it about 20 minutes from side one, and then I'm going to keep working on mine and felt it from side two. And what I'm going to do, since we've already covered felting and fulling, is I'm going to full it all the way so that y'all can see the next time we come together what this actually looks like when it's finished, just so you can see the interplay. So here's my little snakes. You can see those under there, my baubles, some crinklage happening here if you where we have these channels, so that's going to be fun, and then our little felt inclusions underneath. So I hope that you will try one of your own, follow our lessons for felting from all sides, both sides, and then full it as well. And if you want, feel free to let it dry overnight in between so that you can evaluate it the next day and see how much you actually felted it. Remember, you want migration through all of your fabrics. So use room temperature water, not hot. Slow down the felting process a little bit, especially if you're using fine fibers. Otherwise, the fibers just want to felt to themselves and not the fabric. So the thicker the fabric, slow down the felting process. That's why we use bubble wrap and plastic instead of wooden tools like you might on a coarser fiber. Slow down the process, give the fibers time to migrate through the fabric. So can't felt that all in one session, doing all of those little bits, but what we're going to do is turn up and give away some prizes. Oh, want to see this one? Oh yeah, let me show you this one before we turn up. So this is our shrunken fold sample. We've taken it down. We should measure, I have my ruler somewhere. We'll measure it here in just a second and we'll tell you how small it got. We definitely shrunk it down. You can see lots more migration through the back than we had when we started. So this little thing, thank you, Anne. Anne brought me a ruler. It was about 9.5 by 12, and now it is 6 3/4 by 8 3/4. So when we started today, it was 12 by 9.5, and now it's 6 3/4 by 12 3/4. I mean, what did I say? 8 3/4. Yeah, 8 3/4. So we definitely shrunk it down from how we started today. Yep.
And one last question. The resist, the little circle of resist that we
Yeah.
used on that piece, how would we get that out, or would we?
Oh, on this example, I was going to leave it in. So I would only put it under something if I had wool on top, because then you can cut it out. Now, did we do that? We didn't do that on the seascape, but we did that on a tutorial last year where we cut it out. And I'll see if we can find that. But look in our videos under Living Felt Friends, because we did a felt along where we did all kinds of inclusions and we cut those out also. Hey y'all, we're going to turn up the camera and give away some prizes. So bear with us here while we do that. Hey, y'all, thank you so much for your patience while we felted that together. Well, started felting that together. And for those of you who don't know, at the end of every show, we like to give away prizes. So the fairies always want to come back because it's like one of their favorite things to do, besides eat popcorn.
Besides the pie.
Okay, Ann, tell us about our prizes today. We'll start that way.
So our prizes today are 2 2-ounce rolls of merino top and 2 embellishment fibers of your choice. And of course you can pick the colors of the merino top that you'd like. We put together an assortment today just showing some different bundles.
Different things you might choose. So we have 75 colors of merino top, and I don't know, lots of embellishment fibers, tussa silk, sari silk, dyed bamboo, silk hankies, neps. So if you'll email, we're going to draw 3 names right now, and if you will email or call customer service, you can email customerservice@livingfelt.com, or you can call us at 877-665-5790 and tell us what you want to pick. But go to our site under Luster Luxury Fibers for the bling,
Yes.
and merino top for the fiber.
Alrighty, and let's scoot in because Marie's not on camera.
Whatever. I'm just a talking head. It's okay.
Alright. So who wants to draw the first name?
I'll go first. All right, the first winner is Candace Bosse.
Yay! Congratulations.
Here, you go for it, Holly.
Okay. Roseanne Kathleen Little.
Yay! One more.
You want to do it, Marie?
Oh, you haven't heard from me enough. Okay. And our final winner for today is Karen Storkamp. Yay! Thank you everyone for tuning into the live show. You can watch the replay on YouTube, usually starting tomorrow about midday. It will also be here under videos, but the high resolution is on YouTube. So subscribe to our channel. Just search Living Felt on YouTube, and yeah, we'll see you next time. Okay, guys.
Bye.
Have a great week. We hope you enjoyed today's show. Thank you so much for watching and tuning in. Be sure you hit the subscribe button if you haven't already. We hope that you'll join the live show on Wednesdays at 2. That is on facebook.com/livingfelt. And please think about joining our group on Facebook. Just search Living Felt Friends. It's an awesome community of really warm and supportive people who will help you. They'll share tips and techniques and feedback and just generally ooh and ah over everything you make. So no matter where you are in the world, consider joining our community. It's a really fun place to be. And thank you so much for watching. We can't wait to see what you made as a result of today's show. Bye, y'all.